Hey there everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a player that wants to make the most complicated character ever, and then has a literal meltdown over not being able to do something. A story about a dungeon master that just can't quite get players' backstories right, and more. But before we get into those, here is Lucky with a song to give us some bardic inspiration against the cringe that some of these stories are sure to induce.
Hey Lucky.
Thanks, buddy. Now I think we are ready for these stories. Overly complicated character backstory and hypersensitive player make a bad combo. By Reddit user Victoronomy. A few years ago, a friend reached out to me about joining an online Pathfinder game. This was before COVID, but our group lasted well into the worst of it. The GM of that Pathfinder game was described as a true master of his craft. Let's call him Lenny. Lenny was a great game designer, but unfortunately, a mediocre DM. But that's another horror story. It was a mediocre game, but the camaraderie was enough for me to keep playing. After a year or more, the game wrapped, and we decided on another system, and a player volunteered to take up the mantle as GM. He was a first-timer, so I was kinda helping a bit behind the scenes, answering questions and giving feedback, and all was well so far. We decided on a superhero game, and landed on mutants and masterminds. The DM asked that we not select powers yet, but come in with normal humans, fully fleshed out with backstories. This seemed reasonable, so we all made our characters and decided to do a Game Zero practice game to figure out some of the rules. Here's where things start going sideways. I make a nurse who served in the military. He suffers from PTSD. I think it was pretty interesting, if standard fare. And another player makes a weed-smoking surfer with mommy issues. Another makes a parkour-loving DJ with daddy issues, and they all seemed like fun characters. Our former DM decides to take a different approach though. His character has all the backstory. The character is a super rich businessman, think Tony Stark, who went to school to become a high-powered lawyer, like Murdoch. He practiced for a few years, then went back to school to become a medical doctor, Dr. Strange. Practiced for a few years, but is also a full-time reporter, Clark Kent. Here's the kicker. No one knows that he is all four of these people. They are four separate secret identities. They all have separate work lives, and he maintains all of them. Plus, he also believes that he's an angel, like an incarnation, or maybe reincarnation of an angel. And he may have heard angel voices. I don't exactly remember. So he has, at this point, like 5 secret identities, all with involved backstories. I tried to help piece it together into something usable through a conversation, and I suggested that he could have been a bored rich boy who studied everything, tried on careers and left them behind when he moved on to the next thing. But no. He wants them all to have offices and jobs, and he maintains all of these IDs. After this, the GM is humming and humming, but he doesn't say no. At this point, another player and I are goofing a bit on his overly complicated backstory, really no differently than we goofed with each other or other players. But then Lenny gets prickly. We work through some basic roles, as we quote-unquote explore a carnival in this Game Zero, and it's obvious that the GM is setting us up with tailored skill rolls, so we can all get a crack at practicing. We come to a point where someone must climb the Ferris wheel, and parkour player steps up to shine. But Lenny stomps all over it, and rolls without asking or being prompt, even though he doesn't have the skill needed, and will be rolling straight attribute. Parkour is miffed, as it's obvious that this was his skill challenge, so parkour calls it out. Hey, this was my challenge. Then Lenny literally melts down, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. He begins screaming and ranting and raving, calling parkour horrible names, claiming that we're all out to get him, saying that we are using meta-knowledge since our characters don't know his character. I will reiterate that this is a Game Zero practice session with no lasting repercussions. It's not even a real part of the game. The GM wraps everything up, and everyone drops off as the GM and I start to talk Lenny down. 2 hours. I kid you not. 2 full hours of trying to get him to admit that he may have overreacted. We readily admit Parkour could have handled it better, that we shouldn't have ribbed him about his character's concept, etc. But Lenny refused to apologize, even though Parkour reached out to apologize first. So we took a vote, and wound up booting him from the group. We did wind up playing, and had a lot of fun. Though I can't imagine how the game would have went if Lenny was allowed to play his confused mess of a character. None of us were innocent victims here, but I feel that most people, especially a group of mostly experienced players, expect a little gentle ribbing and some teasing now and then. Holy jeez. Imagine being a first-time game master and having that complex, or in better terms, hodgepodge mess of a character that a player wants to play, even if it is just for a practice game. Then to have that player have a full-on hissy fit when he was called out for stepping on another player's obvious time for his character to shine. At least the other players did the right thing and tried to talk it out, with Parkour even apologizing to Lenny, even though he had no reason to in my opinion. But even after all of that, Lenny just couldn't have any self-awareness. So yeah, it was probably best that they just kicked him from the group, as I could only see that player making any future games a nightmare. And I'm glad to hear that OP and the other players ended up having a great, drama-free time playing. On to the next one. DM demands long, deep backstories, and then doesn't use them. By Reddit user, Freelancer359. I've played with this DM for over 2 campaigns so far, over about 5 years, and I'm about to join his 3rd next week. Everyone at the table has fun with his campaigns, and it's a great experience. That said, whenever we're doing character creation, he always requests that we come in with deep established character backstories, with NPCs, and our story before the campaign. People we're close to, where we're from, which is based off his own world building that he establishes in Session 0 with a big world map that he puts on the table, etc. He always asks for at least 2 pages of backstory, and then never uses any of it. Not only that, but he doesn't even remember who our characters are close to from our backstories. For example, in our last campaign, war broke out, and we had been run out of a hostile city. We limped our way to a nearby town, and the DM requested to know where we were going to be staying. Our paladin, it turned out, had written her backstory that she was literally born in this major town. It's the primary grain exporter for the main city of the kingdom, and her parents were still living here, with their own farm. Just to be clear here, we're required to upload PDF copies of our backstories into a Discord group chat at the start of the campaign, so that the DM can quickly reference if needed. So he pulled out his phone, and there it was, written months prior, that this character was born in this town and had parents, and a brother who worked as a farmhand, still living here. His whole plan for the session kinda fell apart, since we had immediate safe housing, and he planned on pushing us out again and chasing us farther. He wanted to interrupt our rest at the local inn, because where else would we stay in town, by having the guards show up in the middle of the night, and he'd have a new NPC ally, a druid, show up to guide us to a safe place in the nearby forest, after we'd fought off or escaped from the initial group of guards. Us shacking up in the barn of our parents made it a bit hard for anyone to turn us in, and caused the guards to just happen to find us without warning. There was a large number of farms in the town, and the guards didn't have our names, let alone know we had a person with a family in this town. Not only that, but when the paladin was making small talk with her parents, they were not very communicative, and the DM clearly remembered none of their characterizations that had been agreed upon at the start of the campaign. Another example was from our first campaign. My character, a wizard at the time, had a mentor that his character was writing letters to whenever he was in a town and sending them off to his mentor. I never once received a reply the entire campaign. Not only that, but when the DM introduced a higher wizard NPC to the party, he stated out of character that this new wizard would be my character's mentor and teacher for the campaign, and was incredibly confused when I said, "My character has a mentor and teacher already. It's written in my backstory." Overall, we have fun at the table, and his campaigns are really great, but it's just such a downer and an annoyance to have to write multiple pages of in-depth backstory for my characters, when I know that none of it will end up showing up in the actual campaign. I know he looks at the sheets, because we have long discussions about the backstories prior to character approval, so I have no idea why he never actually incorporated any of it. He requests the character sheets a full 4 weeks before we begin each campaign, so he can look them over and finalize his campaign ideas and stuff, but then never includes our work. We've talked to him about it, and he's always promised to do better with the backstory inclusion, but then never does. I wouldn't mind it half as much if he didn't require us to write a deep backstory prior to the start of each campaign. Edit. I do want to add that the 2-page backstory also includes some basic character descriptions of any major characters from our past, basic appearance, a couple key personality traits, etc., so that we have more involvement for when or if those NPCs show up. It's not a minimum of 2 full pages of prose as our backstory. We also usually begin at level 3, so our characters have some combat experience and training under our belts. Yeah, that has to suck to come up with a really in-depth backstory for your character, only for the Dungeon Master to never use it at all in the campaign. Now, I know that OP said that they had talked to the DM about this, and that the DM apologized and said that he would try to do better in that regard, but yet hasn't. Now, I wouldn't do this in an antagonizing way, but maybe occasionally remind him that you would like to have some backstory elements pop up, because chances are that he's not doing it on purpose, but just has a forgetful memory. Believe me, I forget things a lot sometimes, and I actually appreciate it when someone reminds me of something. Hopefully, the future campaigns will be more rich with backstories for your group, OP. Now, before we move on, I just want to give a quick update. As some of you know, I have been going through some health-related stuff. Now, progress is being made to hopefully make things better, but in the meantime, I'm going to try to keep a schedule of putting out videos each Tuesday and Thursday for now, and will hopefully return to my normal upload schedule in the coming weeks. And I do have to say that all of your well wishes have really helped brighten up my mood this past month. So I just wanted to say thank you. But with that said, let's move on to today's final story. Store shuts down D&D nights permanently, mid-session over Facebook post. By Reddit user, Odandy. So this is a bit of a different RPG horror story that isn't about bad behavior from a singular player or DM. Apologies if this doesn't constitute an RPG horror story, and I'll remove it if I have to. At the very least, I am at least very shook by this experience. So for about 4 months now, I have been DMing in person at a physical game store. It's a paid position, and we run 2 tables of 8 people each Thursday night. Our D&D nights were fantastic, easily filling every single seat to the point where I have to keep reminding people to pre-register weeks ahead of time. We have a lot of great folks that show up, from parents bringing their children to some other socially awkward people that were getting better with their social skills by interacting in an RPG setting. There were definitely some hiccups. The DM before me was just a straight-up creep. I made an entire RPG horror story about him. You can see that on my profile about the guy who did ERP with kids at the table. Enough said, he got fired. We've also had some obnoxious children that I've had to be the surrogate father for, because for some reason, no parent was ever with them. Other than that, things were fantastic, Our group of DMs are all in line with each other, helping each other out and covering when we need to. Our regular players listen to us and understand certain rules and restrictions that we put in place, while also allowing them to do mostly what they wanted. We had people show up every single Thursday night like it was church for them. This will be relevant later, but it should also be noted that everyone who shows up has to pay a $5 fee for their seat, and also every person who shows up is going to end up buying drinks, food, and perhaps even merchandise, so it was very profitable for the store. So tell me, please explain to me why then last night, while we're in the middle of another great session, that the DMs look at our phones and see that in our private Facebook group that the game coordinator dude posted that they're shutting down D&D nights immediately, with no explanation why. Just like that. He couldn't even come to the store and tell us to our faces, and he asked us to let the players know that this awesome community that we fostered is now going to be essentially shut down. Luckily, since I'm a manager in my big boy job, I was more than used to having these kinds of hard talks in a group setting, but that didn't mean it was easy though. I'd like to reiterate that this happened in the middle of a session. No clues or hints that this was happening. Just dump this in a Facebook post and allow us to deal with the fallout. One of the DMs is an actual employee of the store, and apparently he said that it may or may not have been because of the 3 little boys that I mentioned earlier, who were obnoxious because people complained about them. I can't confirm that, but if that's the case, that's insane to me. Just ban the kids if they're ruining everyone's time. Update. Okay. Looks like we got somewhat of a more solid answer to why we were just out of the blue got dumped. The coordinator told us that the owner of the store shut down D&D nights because he wanted structure and to fix the AC. The AC I get. It was pretty hot in the game room, but that was also why we have like 5 fans in there, and it felt pretty fine at least to me, and I'm a really big guy. But also, if someone passes out from heat stroke, that's a lawsuit, which is understandable. But does that also mean that the TCG players and every single other event that was hosted weekly in that room is also being cancelled? Or is it just us? And then the structure thing. I have no idea what vague illusion that's supposed to be. 2 DMs, 2 tables, 8 people per table. The description of the one-shot was posted online, along with the ability to pre-register a seat, and it indicates what level character you need to bring. It's more structure than most campaigns that I've played in, but I'm hoping to get a clear answer soon. Man, talk about a punch in the gut. And being told via Facebook during a session nonetheless. Hopefully, this just all boils down to a lack of communication of why they're being shut down. And hopefully, it's just a temporary thing, as the store owner gets the air conditioning in the building to make things more comfortable with the patrons. And as far as the structure thing goes, perhaps he didn't mean structure as far as setting up the games, but maybe structure as in expanding the store a bit for more room, because as it sounds, the D&D nights brought in some good money for the store, and I'm sure that a good store owner wouldn't want to just throw that away for no good reason. So hopefully my summation is correct, and OP and their awesome D&D community will have a place to return to soon. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I really do appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.